let's look at drum rack next. So this in Ableton, if you use Ableton, you've probably seen it. Oh, you can't adjust this. Okay. But it's essentially a sampler. So in any other software or any other model of a sampler, it's very similar in that you just have a bunch of slots where you can drop clips of audio and then play them on like with MIDI. So that's the basic concept. This is actually under the scenes, very similar to the simpler instrument that we will look at next. So I found a drum rack that was kind of what I was looking for, and then I just switched out some of the samples. Ooh, I'm gonna take a step back. One other thing I wanted to make sure everybody is familiar with is where to put your samples. Um, so in this case, the samples from this particular song are in this current projects folder, but for most of my samples, I just went in here and added a folder using this button. In my library, called it samples, and that's where I put samples that I know I want to use more than once. So this is where I have all those, and then I also have the ones from like various packs and that came with Ableton Suite and everything. But always try to keep your samples somewhere where you know where they are. Organize them if that's your thing. I'm not that organized, but it helps. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that. So what I did was I just went and found little drum-like sounds and just drag and drop them onto these pads here. And then you can see this, that you have access to the sampler here where you can go and make adjustments. So anybody who went to the sound design workshop we had, you'll notice that a lot of these controls are the same. You can filter, you can change the frequency resonance and drive and all that same stuff. So that's also a good just takeaway. Knowing the basics of like subtractive synthesis and to some extent FM synthesis is going to be really helpful in a huge slew of instruments because you'll start noticing have the same basic controls about them. In Ableton, they literally look exactly the same. Outside of Ableton, they might be called different things, but they do the same things. So I dragged some samples on here. Another note about that is that if you have a drum sound like this tom that kind of has a note tone to it and it doesn't fit the key of the song, oops, I didn't mean to play that. Still playing, stop playing. You can just drop a tuner on here, or if you're not using Ableton, use a tuner app, and then go in here and change the, I can't see mine on here, but when you have an audio clip open like we had open earlier, you can actually just transpose by semitones, get it onto the right note, but something in the key of your song. So just a quick little tip on that. Our drums, there are a few different variations of them. My process was to just come up with a few variations here in the session view and then throw them into the places where I thought they made sense here. So not a whole lot to go into there. Just know that this also is useful as a sampler. Like the first times I ever remixed songs like 10 years ago, all I did was cut the song up and threw each piece of it onto a different pad in a drum rack and then just played that on a MIDI controller. And like that can be a really fun way to rethink a song and remix.